The Mafia boss insulted her in Arabic. The waitress answered back and called him a coward. The city never truly slept. Its streets hummed with whispers, some of them dangerous, most of them secret. Lanterns flickered in the night fog, casting long shadows over cobblestones slick with recent rain. In the heart of the city stood the Crimson Lantern, a tavern known for its warmth, its ale, and its ability to keep certain visitors invisible to the world outside. Tonight, however, nothing could hide the tension that lingered in the air like smoke. Lila moved with quiet precision, her hands carrying mugs of steaming tea to the tables, her eyes alert to every movement in the dim light. She had grown used to noticing the subtle shifts in people, the way their hands trembled when they were scared, the way their gaze flickered when they lied. But tonight, she sensed something different, something heavy, like the weight of shadows gathering around one corner of the room. He entered without warning. Cale, the man whose name was spoken in fear and awe in equal measure, stepped into the tavern as if the night itself had bent to make way for him. He was tall, his dark coat brushing the floor, his eyes cold and sharp, reflecting a world that had long ago betrayed him. Rumors said he was untouchable, that curses clung to him like armor, that even the bravest warriors bent before him. Yet here he was, walking toward a crowd that instinctively parted before him, as if the shadows themselves obeyed his will. Lila noticed him immediately. Most people froze or lowered their heads, but she did neither. There was a fire in her that refused to bow. Perhaps it was her mother's voice echoing in her mind, or the memory of years surviving on her own strength. Whatever it was, it made her meet his gaze without flinching. Cale's eyes, sharp and calculating, landed on her. For a moment, the noise of the tavern faded. The whispers of fear and gossip, the clinking of mugs, the laughter of drunken patrons, all seemed to vanish. He stopped. There's something in the defiance in her eyes caught him off guard. "Who do we have here?" His voice was calm, but dangerous, each word measured, each syllable heavy with authority. He stepped closer, the shadows seeming to cling to him, curling around his boots like dark smoke. Lila's hands tightened around the tray she carried. "Just someone doing their job," she said, keeping her voice steady. Cale tilted his head, lips curling into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "A brave little waitress," he said in Arabic, his words dripping with mockery. "You speak boldly for someone who knows nothing of power." Heat rose to Layla's cheeks, not with fear, but with fury. Her voice was steady, sharp. "And you speak boldly for someone hiding behind fear." "Maybe you are strong, but you are also weak, afraid to face anyone who challenges you." The room froze. The words hung like a spark over dry kindling. Patrons gasped. Some dared to glance at him, but quickly looked away. Cale's expression hardened. Rage glimmered in his eyes. But beneath it, there was curiosity, something he hadn't felt in years. No one had ever called him a coward without trembling. For a heartbeat, the tavern felt suspended in time. Then Cale laughed, a low, dangerous sound that sent a chill down everyone's spine. "Coward," he repeated slowly, tasting the word, testing it against her defiance. "Bold words from someone who should fear me." Lila didn't flinch. "And maybe the one who should be afraid is you?" she said softly, her gaze unwavering. Cale's lips pressed into a thin line. He had not encountered this type of fire in a long time. Usually fear preceded respect, and respect led to obedience. But Lila had none of it. She was dangerous. Not because of weapons or magic, but because of her courage, and that made her unpredictably strong. "Interesting," he muttered, almost to himself. He turned, stepping away, but his eyes did not leave her. "Remember this night, little wolf," he said, his voice low and rough, carrying an unspoken promise. "We will meet again." Lila returned to her work, though her hands shook slightly. She had survived many things, but this man was a storm in human form, and for the first time she felt a strange mixture of fear and fascination. That night, the city seemed darker than usual. The shadows clung to walls and corners, twisting as if alive. Layla walked home along narrow alleys, her mind replaying the encounter. She could not shake the feeling that Kale's presence had left a mark, not on the walls, not on the streets, but on her. Something had shifted, though she could not say what. Meanwhile, Kale returned to his mansion, a fortress perched on the highest hill, surrounded by walls that whispered of curses and old magic. He paced in silence, the words of the defiant waitress echoing in his mind. Coward. The simplicity of the insult gnawed at him. For the first time in decades, someone had looked at him and seen not the power, not the fear, but the man behind the shadow. He examined his reflection in a blackened mirror. The face staring back at him was strong, sharp, unyielding, but hollow. Years of ruthless choices, of blood and betrayal, had left him cursed, immortal yet imprisoned in his own darkness, and yet he had felt a spark tonight, a flicker of something he had long abandoned. Lila's defiance had awakened a feeling he did not understand. Curiosity, fascination, something that bordered on longing. The shadows around him seemed to stir, whispering in a language older than the city itself. "Find her," they murmured. "She is the key." Kyle knew instinctively that the warnings were not metaphorical. Lila was not an ordinary girl. Her courage, her sharpness, her fire. There was power in her, subtle and dangerous. And now that power had brushed against his own darkness, leaving him restless, unsteady. The next day, Lila returned to work as usual. She told no one of the incident, yet she could feel the eyes of strangers lingering, sensing the ripple she had caused in the city's undercurrents. She kept busy, moving quickly, speaking politely, but she could not ignore the memory of KL, the way his eyes had studied her, the way the shadows seemed to follow him. She thought of her mother, weak but resilient, and how she had taught Lila to stand when threatened. "Courage," she had said, "is not the absence of fear but the choice to act despite it." Lila realized she had acted, and that choice had drawn attention, more attention than she was prepared for. Meanwhile, Kale's men scoured the city in silence, not to harm her, not yet, but to observe, to understand. Lila was clever, elusive, and even their most skilled trackers could not predict her movements. Every encounter she had, every small act of defiance, only deepened the mystery surrounding her. Days passed, and the tension between them remained unspoken yet palpable. In the quiet moments, Layla felt the weight of unseen eyes, the brush of danger that whispered through her hair like a warning. Frost and Kale, in the solitude of his dark halls, found himself staring into shadows, imagining her face, hearing her voice. He wondered what it meant to be touched by someone immune to fear, someone whose defiance could pierce even the thickest armor of power and curse. The city did not forgive easily, and neither did Kale. But for the first time he considered something he had never allowed himself to hope for. Connection. Perhaps even redemption. Perhaps even something dangerous and beautiful, called trust. That night, Lila closed the shutters of her small apartment and stared at the city's skyline. Moonlight reflected off the river, silver and calm, betraying nothing of the storms below. She thought she had survived the encounter, but she felt a stirring in her chest she could not name. A warning, perhaps, or a promise. She did not know. And far away, in his dark mansion, Kale touched a small, enchanted mirror on the wall. It shimmered, showing her image, faint and flickering, as if tied to some invisible thread. he whispered under his breath, almost a vow. You called me a coward, and yet you will see me. The shadows seemed to lean closer, listening, waiting, alive with anticipation. Somewhere deep in the city, the first hints of destiny moved, silent and unyielding, and both the wolf and the little fire knew, in ways neither could yet name, that the night they had met was only the beginning. The city streets were quieter than usual that evening, though the fog hung heavier, curling around the corners and spilling from alleys like silver smoke. Lila moved swiftly through the shadows, balancing a basket of herbs and bread for her mother. Her mind was restless, replaying the encounter from the tavern over and over. The words, the way he had looked at her, lingered like a shadow she could not shake. She had thought that fear would follow a man like Cale. Fear or obedience. Yet she felt neither. Only a prickling at her spine, a warning she did not fully understand. Something in the way he carried himself suggested storms beneath calm waters, darkness hiding truths no one dared to uncover. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sound, a soft, precise step behind her. She froze. The fog twisted, as if it were alive, wrapping the street in silence. Layla's heart beat steadily. She had learned early to trust her instincts, to feel what others could not, and her instincts screamed now. You move like a shadow, a voice said, low and smooth, echoing from the fog. Lila did not turn. And you move like one who thinks the night belongs to him, she said, her voice calm, though her senses sharpened. Kael stepped from the mist, as silent as the darkness around him. He was closer than she expected. His presence filled the alley, heavy and magnetic, but there was no threat. Yet.
Not yet. You walk alone, he said, studying her carefully.
Do you always dare the world so boldly? I walk where I must, she replied, keeping her tone neutral. Fear does not guide my steps. Interesting. He circled her slowly, like a predator studying its prey, though she sensed no malice in his movement. It was curiosity that drove him, something unfamiliar, something almost human. You are brave, he said after a pause, his voice softer now. But bravery without knowledge is dangerous. I do not need your warning, Lila said, finally allowing herself to meet his gaze. She noticed for the first time the way his eyes reflected the city lights, sharp and cold, yet deep with secrets. And I do not need your protection. Kael stopped, studying her in silence. He had not expected resistance, not this unflinching fire. Most people bent to his shadow. Few had ever held it at bay. Her courage was a puzzle he could not yet solve, a flame that refused to die. You are fearless, little wolf, he said almost quietly. Do you not realize the danger you bring to yourself by defying me? I am aware, Lila said, steady. And yet, I still defy you. Because the world does not bend to fear alone. For a long moment they simply stood, watching each other. Around them, the city seemed to pause, the fog thickening, as if the night itself was holding its breath. Kael felt something stirring inside him, a pull he had not experienced in years. Layla was ordinary in her appearance, unarmed, human, and yet she carried a power that challenged him without words. You are curious, he finally said, his voice low and almost reluctant. Do you know what you are playing with? I do, she said softly. And I am not afraid. Kael studied her for a final moment. He wanted to warn her, to demand she disappear from his city before danger found her. Yet he could not. There was a strange, dangerous fascination he could not explain, and it compelled him to stay. You will see me again, he said, his tone calm but final. Whether you want to or not. Then, as silently as he had appeared, he melted back into the shadows, leaving Lila alone with her racing thoughts. The following days passed in uneasy routine. Lila carried on with her duties, though a subtle tension threaded through each step. She sensed Cale's presence everywhere, not in direct confrontation, but in the feeling of being watched, studied, assessed. Her instincts warned her, though no danger had yet come. And yet the curiosity she felt about him was impossible to ignore. Cale, meanwhile, returned to his mansion, a towering structure of stone and shadow perched atop the city's highest hill. Inside, the walls whispered of curses and secrets, of long-buried crimes and dark magic. Cale wandered through corridors lined with mirrors and paintings, each reflecting a life he had shaped through fear and obedience. Yet none of it satisfied him tonight. He could not stop thinking of the waitress, the little wolf who had called him a coward. The word echoed in his mind, sharp and insolent. And more than that, it stirred something he had long abandoned, the desire for trust, for connection, for someone to see the man beneath the shadows. The curse that had defined his life, a darkness that fed on fear, binding him to a cycle of power and isolation, whispered through the mansion. Cale felt it pressing at his thoughts, warning him of dangers yet unseen. But he ignored it, consumed by a strange need to find her again, to understand her, to see if the fire in her eyes could survive in his world of shadows. The tension between them built slowly over the next week. Kyle's men watched her movements discreetly, reporting details of her routines, yet none dared to intervene. Lila remained clever, elusive, careful not to draw attention beyond what was necessary. But in the quiet moments she sensed eyes upon her, the weight of unseen assessment, and she could not help but wonder why one man, and only one, seemed so. It was during one of these evenings, as Lila returned from the market with a basket of fresh herbs, that she felt the danger more acutely. A group of men blocked the alley ahead, their intentions obvious, their movements coordinated. Fear might have frozen anyone else, but Lila's years of survival had honed her instincts. She took a deep breath, centering herself. "Step aside," she said calmly, though her heart raced. The leader smirked. "Not until you answer a question, little wolf." Before she could respond, a shadow detached itself from the darkness above. Cale stepped down from a fire escape, landing silently among the men. They froze, recognizing the wolf of shadows in an instant. "You will leave her alone," he said, his voice cold, carrying the weight of command that brooked no argument. The men hesitated, then fled into the night. Layla stared at him, amazed and wary. He did not move closer, yet his presence filled the alley like a wall. "You could have been hurt," he said softly, his eyes scanning her carefully. "Do you not realize what you invite by being so defiant?"
"I could say the same about you," she replied, meeting his gaze. "You walk in shadows, yet you cannot control everything around you."
The fire in her eyes was undiminished, and he realized that fascination had grown into something more complicated, something that unsettled him more than fear ever had. "You are clever," he said finally. "And brave, dangerous, but not invincible." He looked away, briefly, the shadows flickering across his face. He had not expected her to see him so clearly, to confront him without flinching. And yet, it was her courage that made him think of things he had long refused to consider. Trust, connection, the possibility of change. Days passed. Lila returned home to her mother, who was still recovering from a lingering illness. The small apartment was filled with the scent of herbs and warm bread, a sanctuary from the dangers of the city. Yet even here, Lila could not shake the feeling that something was shifting, that the threads of fate were pulling tighter around her. Cale, in his mansion, studied reports from his men, noting every movement of hers, yet he felt the data could not fully capture her essence. There was something intangible in her presence, something that defied observation. A spark that no surveillance could measure. He began to leave traces of himself for her to find, not threats, but messages, small tokens, reminders that he was watching, that he cared, that he was drawn to her in ways he did not yet understand. And Lila, ever observant, began to notice them. Small signs, fleeting glimpses, whispers in the wind. And she wondered what this man truly wanted from her.
One evening, as she prepared supper for her mother, a letter arrived at her door.
No name, no seal, only a simple phrase written in dark ink. You cannot hide from the night, nor from me. Lila's fingers trembled slightly as she read it. Fear flickered for an instant, but it was not the dominant feeling. Curiosity, intrigue, and a strange pull deep within her chest took over. This is different. She could feel it in her bones. The storm of shadows that Cale carried, and the strange, dangerous bond forming between them. Darkened mansion. Cale stared into the flickering fire, thinking of her. He had reached the edge of something he could not name. Trust, respect. Something deeper, older, primal, tied to the very curse that had haunted him for decades. He had seen her courage, her defiance, and he knew, without a doubt, that she was the only one who could pierce the walls he had built around himself. But yet he understood the danger of their collision. Both of them were fire and shadow, strong and unyielding, and the city itself would test them before their fates could intertwine. The city's fog had grown heavier in the past days, as if the night itself was aware of the storm gathering around Lila. She moved with careful steps through the alleys, carrying a basket of bread and herbs for her mother. But now, there was more on her mind than her daily tasks. Cale's presence lingered in every shadow, in every whisper of the wind. Bad. She could not explain it. Fear did not drive her. Yet curiosity, strange and insistent, pulled her forward. It began with small things, a faint shadow that seemed to move alongside her even when no one was there. A whisper carried by the wind, speaking in a language she felt rather than heard. A token left at her door, a single black feather, soft as night, with a note that simply read, "You are seen." Lila studied it, fingers trembling slightly, though not with fear. She had survived danger before, but this felt different. She could feel a power behind it, one that carried both darkness and something unspoken, almost tender. The word curse came unbidden to her mind. Cale was not just a man. He was a storm bound in flesh, carrying shadows that reached into the city and beyond. Meanwhile, Cale stood in his mansion, watching the city through tall, arched windows. His mind was restless, occupied with her. Her courage, her fire, her ability to see him as a man rather than a myth. It unsettled him more than any rival ever could. And he was cursed, Day. He had not spoken of it to anyone. The curse bound him to the shadows he commanded, feeding on fear and control. It had kept him alive for decades, yet it had also isolated him from everything he had once cared for. And now, the little waitress, so ordinary, so human, had touched a part of him that he had long abandoned. Cale's shadows whispered warnings, old and sharp. They spoke of danger, of enemies waiting to strike while he was distracted. Yet, even the shadows could not stop him. He would see her again, no matter the cost. The next encounter came on a night heavy with rain. Lila was returning from gathering herbs at the edge of the market, the streets slick and glimmering under the lantern light. The air shifted, the fog thickened, and a quiet presence approached. Cale stepped from the mist. Kyle stepped from the mist. Its coat clung to him like a dark wave, and the faint glow from the lanterns reflected in his eyes, making them seem almost alive with fire. "You move, as if the city itself bends for you," he said, voice low, calm, almost admiring. "And yet you follow me?" she replied, not hiding her awareness. "Do you tire of watching shadows, or are you curious about what they hide? Perhaps both." Perhaps one, and not the other. But you, he paused, searching her face. You are not ordinary. You carry a strength most do not even recognize in themselves. I do what I must, Lila said, steady. No more, no less. Power without purpose is empty.
The words struck him.
He had lived a life of power without purpose, building a kingdom of shadows, feeding on fear, ignoring everything else. And yet, here she was, teaching him something he had long forgotten. Courage that came from the heart, not from dominance. Days passed, and the city grew restless. Lila noticed figures in alleys, whispers on rooftops. It was not Kale's men. This was something older, darker. Rival factions of the city had begun to move, sensing the disruption her presence had caused. They had heard of the little wolf who defied the wolf of shadows, and their curiosity had turned to action. Kale, sensing the shift, approached Lila. He found her in the small garden behind her home, where herbs grew wild and fragrant. The rain had softened into mist, and the air was heavy with possibility.
You are in danger, he said. Not commanding, but warning. Rivals know of you.
They will try to use you to reach me. I know, she said simply, not afraid.
I am not hiding.
You should be, he said, voice low and rough, carrying a weight she felt in her bones. I cannot protect you from everything.
The city is too dark, the shadows too deep. Then I will face what comes. Breath. And I will not run from it. A fire in her words, her defiance drew something out of him, a protective instinct he had long buried beneath fear and darkness. For the first time, he did not see her as a threat, nor merely as curiosity. He saw her as a partner in a game far larger than either of them, a force capable of standing beside him. Their bond grew in subtle ways. Al did not ask for loyalty. He offered it quietly, in the form of guidance, protection, and sometimes information about the city that no one else would share. Lila did not yield. She asked questions, challenged him, and in doing so, revealed pieces of herself he had not expected to see. Ah, you are not afraid, he said one evening as they walked the rain-soaked streets. Most would tremble. Most would flee. I am not most people, she said, glancing up at him, catching the faintest hint of vulnerability behind his mask of control. I face what must be faced. And you. Her gaze narrowed. You do not face yourself. Kael's steps slowed. He had never had anyone speak to him like this. Not servants, not allies, not enemies. Her words were truth. Unflinching, unyielding, and they carried the weight of something he could not ignore. You are right, he admitted quietly, almost reluctantly. I do not face myself. And perhaps that is why you intrigue me so much. You see me, not the wolf I am supposed to be. Danger escalated when rival factions decided to strike. They attacked a small caravan near the city's edge, one that Kale's men had been using to track her movements discreetly. Lila, sensing the ambush in advance through her instincts, barely escaped. She ran through twisting streets, the rain slick underfoot, until she reached a deserted alley. Kale appeared as if from nowhere, his coat dripping, eyes blazing with something fierce. He moved with precision, confronting the attackers with a calm that belied the storm around him. Layla watched, awe and fear mingling, as he dismantled the threat with quiet efficiency. And yet, despite his power, there was a vulnerability. He could not control everything, and the reality of risk weighed heavily upon him. Du should not have been there, he said, voice low, though there was no anger, only concern. I was careful, she said. But fate is not so easily tamed. Kyle studied her closely. The thought struck him. She was not only brave, but wise beyond her years. And in that wisdom he saw a chance, an opportunity to face the shadows that had haunted him for decades. But only if she would stand beside him willingly. That night they stood on a rooftop overlooking the city, the fog curling like living smoke around them. Layla's breath came in quiet puffs. Kael's eyes scanned the streets below. For the first time they were equal in presence, two forces poised against the darkness.
I cannot control everything, Kael said softly, almost to himself.
But perhaps together we could face more than I thought possible. Lila studied him, the weight of his words sinking in. She had been wary, skeptical, and defiant, yet here he was, offering a partnership, not dominance. She felt a strange stirring in her chest, a mixture of fear and hope, danger and possibility. I will not bow, she said firmly, but I will stand with you, if it is true we face the same path. Kael's lips curved slightly, a shadow of a smile. Then we shall see. But know this, the night grows darker before it finds the dawn. The next day, Lila discovered something hidden in her apartment, a small, ancient charm, blackened and faintly glowing. It pulsed with power she did not understand, yet it resonated with something inside her. She realized that Kael's world was not merely one of human power, but of magic, of curses, of old forces she had only glimpsed in tales and whispered stories. And Kael, far above the city, sensed her discovery. The shadows in his mansion whispered warnings, reminding him that fate could be cruel, and that danger always followed desire. But he did not turn away. Instead, he allowed the pull between them to grow, knowing that the choices ahead would test courage, trust, and the strength of their hearts. The city held its breath that night. Mist twisted around rooftops and alleys, hiding dangers in its folds. The air was thick with tension, carrying whispers of power, fear, and destiny. Somewhere in the shadows, Lila moved with purpose, her instincts sharp, her heart steady. She could feel the stirrings of magic around her, faint but persistent, pulling her toward the edges of the city where danger and fate intertwined. She did not have to wait long. Figures emerged from the fog, agents of the rival faction, skilled and silent. They had heard of the little wolf who dared to defy the wolf of shadows and had come to remove her before she became a threat. Lila's fingers brushed against the charm she had discovered earlier, the one that pulsed faintly with old magic. She did not fully understand it, but she trusted her instincts, as she always had. "Show yourselves," she called, her voice steady, echoing across the empty street. "I am not afraid." A shadow moved among the mist, and Kael stepped beside her, as silent and imposing as night itself. He had come not to dominate, not to command, but to stand as her ally, his presence a shield and a challenge at once. "You are outnumbered," he said softly, almost to himself, though she heard him. "But together we can face more than you imagine." Lila nodded, trusting him without words. Together, they were no longer hunter and hunted, shadow and flame. They were partners, two forces that could confront danger head-on. The rival agents advanced. Their steps were careful, deliberate. But the city itself seemed to bend against them, fog and shadow twisting to obscure their vision. Kael moved first, swift and precise, disarming two men with fluid motions, his hands like blades. Layla followed, using agility and quick thinking to evade attacks, striking only when necessary, her charm glowing faintly in her hand. The fight was not just physical, it was a clash of wills. Kael's calm authority guided them through the danger, while Lila's courage and instincts allowed them to anticipate and counter each move. They moved together, synchronized yet independent, a dance of shadow and fire across the rain-slick streets. In the chaos, a larger threat emerged. The leader of the rival faction, a man known for cruelty and cunning, stepped forward, a dark sword in hand, his eyes gleaming with malice. Layla felt a chill of instinctive warning, but Kale's hand on her shoulder grounded her. "Stay close," he whispered. "We face this together." The clash with the leader was fierce. Kale's strength and skill kept him protected, but Lila's charm pulsed brighter now, reacting to his curse, reacting to the dark magic surrounding them. The leader's attacks were relentless, but together Kale and Lila found openings, exploiting weaknesses in ways neither could alone. In the midst of the battle, Kale was forced to confront the curse that had bound him for decades. Shadows swirled around him, whispering old threats, tempting him with fear, threatening to consume his will. Lila's presence anchored him. Her courage, her unwavering trust, and the spark of magic within her reminded him that he was not alone, that he did not have to face darkness by himself. He closed his eyes briefly, summoning every ounce of control, every lesson learned, every memory of regret and desire for redemption. The shadows screamed, yet he did not falter. He faced them, not as a wolf of the night, but as a man willing to change, willing to risk everything to protect what mattered. Lila watched, awed and steady. She felt the charm in her hand vibrate, responding to his will, to the force of his choice to break free from the darkness. She realized in that moment that this was what their connection had always been about, more than curiosity, more than defiance. It was trust, courage, and the willingness to face one's own shadows. Kale's eyes opened, brighter now, filled with clarity and power tempered by restraint. The curse recoiled, its whispers fading as he stepped fully into his own strength, not as a master of fear, but as a man redeemed by courage and connection. The rival leader faltered, sensing the shift in the air, the unbreakable bond between Kale and the little wolf beside him. With one final coordinated move, Kale disarmed him, while Lila used her charm to bind his influence, ensuring he could not threaten them again. Silence fell over the streets. Rain dripped from rooftops, and the fog began to lift, leaving only the quiet sound of distant water and the soft pulse of the city returning to life. Kale and Lila stood together, breathing heavily but unharmed. Their eyes met, and for the first time, there was no shadow between them. No unspoken tension, only acknowledgement of what had been faced and survived. "You were extraordinary," Kale said, voice soft yet carrying the weight of respect and admiration. "I could not have done this without you, and I could not have done it without you," Layla replied. "We are stronger together, not apart." There was a pause, the city quiet except for the gentle patter of rain. They both understood the meaning of the moment. This was not just victory, it was transformation. They had faced darkness, fear, and power itself, and had emerged not unscathed, but united, tempered by trials. Days later, the city began to heal from the shadow of the rival factions' attacks. Layla returned to her mother's home, though she was no longer the same. The courage and fire that had always been within her had been tested and strengthened. She had seen darkness, faced it, and emerged with both her spirit and her hope intact. Kale remained at his mansion, but the walls seemed lighter now, the shadows less oppressive. He had faced the curse, acknowledged his past, and accepted the possibility of redemption. For the first time in decades, he allowed himself to hope. Not for power, not for control, but for connection, for trust, for something that resembled peace. They met again on the rooftop where their partnership had been solidified during the battle. The city stretched below them, glimmering with life and possibility. Lila leaned against the railing, the charm now resting quietly in her hand. Kale stood beside her, not as a master, not as a shadow, but as an equal. "You have changed," she said softly, eyes reflecting the rising sun, "not just in battle, but in yourself." "And you," Kale replied, looking at her with a mix of awe and affection, "have changed me more than you know. Your courage, your defiance, has shown me what it means to be truly alive, not just feared." Lila smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and quiet joy. "We have both faced our shadows," she said. "And now We face the dawn together. Kale reached out, taking her hand gently. It was a simple gesture, but one full of meaning. Trust, connection, and the promise of future challenges faced side by side. He no longer sought to control her, nor did she seek to challenge him. They were equals, bound not by fear, but by respect, courage, and a bond forged in trials that had tested both heart and soul. The first rays of sunlight broke over the city, gilding rooftops and streets in gold. The fog lifted, revealing the world renewed, alive and full of possibility. The curse that had haunted Kale was broken, or at least subdued, its whispers silenced by the strength of their trust and shared courage. Lila felt the charm warm in her hand, a gentle pulse that promised guidance, protection, and the lingering spark of magic that would always connect them. She looked at Kale, and in that gaze she saw not a wolf of shadows, but a man capable of love, redemption, and hope. Kale's hand tightened around hers, not as a sign of control but of partnership, of recognition that the darkness they had faced together had transformed them both. They had emerged stronger, wiser, and unafraid. The city below stirred with life, unaware of the quiet victory that had been won above its streets. But Lila and Kyle did not need acknowledgement from the world. Their victory was personal, intimate, and complete in a way that no one else could witness. And yet the night had taught them something neither could forget. Shadows never truly disappear, but they can be faced, understood, and transformed. Courage, trust, and connection were the light that could guide them through any darkness to come. As the sun rose fully over the city, painting the streets with gold, Kale whispered softly, just for her to hear. "And the dawn is ours." Layla smiled, a quiet, radiant smile. "Then let us step forward together."
And together they did.